Welcome back to the Trending Communicator. I'm your host, Dan Nestle. The problem, or a problem, so many of us have as future thinkers is that our colleagues and peers and employers perceive that we don't pay enough attention or even ignore the present, the now. And that's on us, especially communicators and marketers. Someone is paying our freight, and we've got to remember that our excitement about nascent technology or our conviction about trends must be grounded in and clearly related to those who pay us. It really comes down to an urgency gap. When what's urgent to us isn't urgent to our source of income, we've got to think hard about our priorities and put our client or our employer first. At the same time, I think it would be malpractice if we didn't at least present our case and bring our insights to the table. Now, that's a fine and difficult balance to achieve, and I know that because I have failed numerous times to achieve it. And the result could be anxiety, dissatisfaction, a gap between you and your employers that's sadly the only way to close it is to potentially depart from a company. Well, look, I'm bringing all this up because I know that my focus on tech and trends and comms and marketing is important and urgent, and our profession must continue to evolve and stay ahead. Otherwise, we'll be doing our clients, employers, and the audiences that we care about a huge disservice. I mean, I'd much rather help guide them to the future, right? I didn't plan on a soliloquy today, but it's a good way to set the stage for my conversation with someone who I think gets that now versus future balance. And as a result, he's had a remarkable career creating and executing effective, award-winning strategies for too many organizations to mention. Not only is he an integrated communications and marketing leader, I think he's one of the handful of people who actually helped define the category. With a background in design and an instinctive understanding of human behavior, he's worked with his clients to bring focus and clarity to the big X's: CX, UX, DX, customer experience, user experience, and digital experience for the uninitiated among us. And more recently, how generative AI is changing it all. He's a social media OG, a sought-after public speaker. You might have heard him at South by. And he's a facilitator par excellence. Dare I say he's an influencer, a self-described weird unicorn. Please welcome to the show, my friend, Mr. David Armano. David.
Thank you, Dan. Really happy to be here from one unicorn to another.
I've often been called or been accused or called, I don't know what the right word is, an octagonal peg trying to get into a round hole. And I feel that, especially in times like this. And like full disclosure, everybody out there, I have just launched a consultancy business of my own, because I know, and as you heard me say in my monologue there, that I want to bring people into the future, and I think that there's a lot of folks out there who need my help, and frankly, I would enjoy doing that. But I had been employed for quite a while, and I feel like that gap between the future and the present has always been a struggling point for me. Right now, David here has been in similar boats, and I don't know if the rationale for transitioning from one place to another is because of any of that. But right now, David is the CEO of TBD, according to his profile, and we're going to get into what all that means. But I've never seen anybody like you, David, who just takes a view of the situation, and it's not exactly making lemonade from lemons, but it's creating this role in this space for a condition that people have a difficult time coping with or grasping, and it comes down to that future minded kind of outlook, or that mindset, because if it's in the nature of what you've said, of what you've written as the CEO of TBD, that TBD indicates that future. So being future minded has so much impact on where we are right now and how we take our situation right now. But that's a whole long way of kind of, setting things up a bit here. And I do want to get into what that means. So how about you lead into it and get to that CEO of TBD by, walking us through a little bit of the highlights of who you are, why you're a weird unicorn, and what is it the CEO of TBD for those of my listeners who may not know you.
Okay, so to add a little context, because I feel like your listeners are going to be like, "What the hell is Dan talking about?" I've never heard him start with a soliloquy. So, despite the talk of weird and unicorn, like yourself, and both of us can pat ourselves on the back. I've been in the corporate world for a long time. I'm not going to give away my exact age, but let's say I'm well north of 40 at minimum. Okay, so you can do the math or guess there. And so I've been I'm reading a great book right now called From Strength to Strength, and it's all about sort of being in these later stages in your career. Now, in spite that, when I look back at my career, I've been working for companies for 95% of that time. So not that unusual, and that's all been in the professional corporate world. Most of that time has been for in the professional services space, digital agencies, but digital agencies that were very well respected, regarded, that got folded up to larger multinational corporations. Edelman, which I spent nearly 11 years, is actually one of the outliers, being a privately held, but yet large company that I think has hit around $1 billion in revenue. Okay, so it's really important context because as someone who finds themselves as CEO of TBD, meaning that I was recently with a small startup, and now I'm trying to figure out what I do next. That's what the TBD is. This is speaking as someone who's worked as an employee for the majority of their career, as you have, Dan.
Yes, true, totally.
And we're Gen X. Okay, we are Gen Xers. We are children of the 70s. So
pretty far north of 40 then.
Yeah, I said 40s. I put the S in there very intentionally.
That's funny.
As Gen Xers, we are entering this phase in our career where things are going to be more uncertain. Now, look, I have Gen Xer friends who work for large pharma companies, great ones that you've heard of, and they're not thinking about this stuff, but they will be in 5 years, because even in companies like that, they just happen to have a longer runway. Companies like that are more conservative. But if you're working in communications, Dan, the world that you came from, intersection of communications and technology in general, advertising, marketing, these are all worlds that we play in, and you are Gen X, chances are, you need to be looking over your shoulder.
Yeah. I don't think it's just Gen X either, but particularly Gen X is in. Well,
that is a good point, and we'll get into that, because actually, in my new adventures as someone who's only recently entered this world of uncertainty, I've had actually many, many younger people reach out to me and have seen this where they actually didn't have the employment certainty that I enjoy. Now, look, I made a lot of those things happen, but boy, I was 49 the first time I ever got laid off.
Yeah.
And I will never forget, I think I told you this, Dan, I remember having a conversation with someone, and so never got laid off, not once, until age 49 during a global pandemic. So that's what it took for it to happen. And I remember having a conversation with this gentleman, and I'll never forget, I was telling him this, and he goes, "First, I want to tell you, congratulations. That's really not many people go that long without ever being laid off." And I said, "Oh yeah, thank you. It's kind of an accomplishment." I was feeling all proud about myself. And then he's like, Secondly, I want to tell you I'm sorry. And I'm like, what do you mean you're sorry? And he's like, oh, he said, well, because it's never happened to you. And at this age, it's going to be really tough for you to build this muscle that many of us built, earlier in life. Mm-hmm. And he was right on both fronts.
Yeah. Well, you built some serious muscle, though. I remember when that happened, during the pandemic, and I should probably tell everyone also that like we've known each other for quite a while, and like just a couple of years before the pandemic, I was working at Mitsubishi Heavy, and David, you were at Edelman, and I was your client. You came over to Tokyo and you facilitated this incredible workshop, which was my first exposure to you professionally in person. And that's hard to believe because I'd been following you for like 10 years prior to that. But regardless, I had seen you like as this, like, very, I guess, weird unicorn, but uniquely talented person within Edelman. And then when I saw the layoffs happen at Edelman, I was like, geez, it happened to David. I can't believe it. Right.
Yeah.
And so I paid particular attention to you at the time. I saw you appear on Joseph Jaffe.
You got to see me in the corporate context, actually working with a large client, like you said,
working with a large.
Yeah, you got to see like the totally like the difference of where the majority of my energy went. It wasn't a lot of people that knew me or thought they know me from stuff I put online. Like that was almost a creative outlet for me. But the day job is where the majority of my energy goes.
It's amazing because you were so like. I remember I do workshop facilitation myself, and I really enjoy it. It takes so much energy, and you get such a great vibe from the people that you're with. And yesterday, I spoke with somebody who actually gave me a neuroscientific term for that, which I forget right now because neuroscientifically, my mind is not as plastic as it used to be. However, there is this the reason you get energy from people. There's something behind that. What I was going to say though is that you're so comfortable in front of a whiteboard. Maybe that's your design background. And, I thought that, man, I would love to have any opportunity to have another workshop with David. Right. So when I saw that you'd been laid off, I thought, okay, the reaper comes for everyone. And then I thought, okay, he's going to be snapped up. What's he going to do? And so I followed you, and I saw you on Joseph Jaffe's then nascent program, and I love Joseph, and it was it was a great show. And you talked about being the chief pause officer at the time.
Yeah,
and that seriously resonated with me. It was also at a time when I was just considering, because when early pandemic times, you're like, am I really where I want to be? Is this the right thing for me? I'm stuck at home. There's nothing, like the key things about my job might not be the key things anymore. These thoughts run through your head. And I saw you as the chief pause officer. I thought that was what a healthy way to look at things.
Yeah.
Right.
And for those of you who don't know what Dan's referring to, so, more context to set the stage. Early pandemic days, as people like myself were getting laid off, I intentionally, I reflected rapidly on my situation and communicated this, and it was all true. This kind of relates to what I said earlier. It's my first layoff, and I realized, man, I've been running hard. Like I've been doing this corporate thing. Dan, I'm a lot like physically healthier than I was when I was in Japan. When I saw, probably not totally because I'm older, but I'm certainly leaner. Mm-hmm. And my diet is better because partially related to this lifestyle in the corporate world where like you're just running and you're running and you're performing high. I mean, it's great that you felt like a lot goes into that, and to like fly yourself to Japan or have your company fly and do all that. I mean, like that. the rare person can do that and like make every hour of their day and make every great choice. So it's a challenging ride. And so I realized that I've been going full steam.
Yeah.
And now it, wasn't my call, but it ended. And I also thought, when it happens to people, they're never really honest about it. And I had this rare opportunity where I could be honest because it was happening during COVID. Now, this is actually, looking back, this is around the time when LinkedIn first introduced the open to work, which I never did. I never did that. I did it now, but for different reasons. We can get into that later. But point being is I reflected on two things. One, I could give myself the permission to take a beat. And I did. I took a month off and took my son to New York and spent time with his grandparents. He really needed family at that moment. It was a great thing. And then two, I thought, I'm going to this is before people even were talking about it. I said, I'm going to be open about this because I think there's something about this stigma that should change. And, if not me, who's going to sort of like help lead the change? Now, the world has changed since this was 2020. I got early months of the pandemic. It was June 2020. I will never forget. It was the early days of George Floyd. I mean, it was like a little dystopian backdrop of people marching in the streets, civil unrest, and and early days of COVID. And I think that was a part of it too. I think when life feels like, when things feel like they're falling apart, you get this clarity. Mm-hmm. And you also sort of, at least for me, I found that there's always a temptation when time gets tough to behave poorly. I don't most of the time, not all the time, because I'm certainly not perfect, but I usually dig deep and act well, for lack of a better phrase. Because I challenge myself. And something I've always noticed in the professional world, so always a good litmus test is that like, how is it, like, leaders, I've noticed the best leaders always do well under pressure. Mm-hmm. That's how you tell. If you ever want to know the difference between a really good leader and a not so good leader, watch them when things are not going well for them, because the standout leaders will dig deep and rise to the challenge. And the ones that are not great. Now, by the way, the corporate world is full of the latter because they are survivors. Yeah. And a lot of those poor behaviors get rewarded in the corporate world. Sorry. Mm-hmm. That is true. That is the truth. So it doesn't always mean that you're going to have an amazing career, but I've seen enough leaders who really shine in those instances. And when done well and when done professionally, they rise to the top as well. Yeah. It's hard times make hard people or something like this. I forget what it is. There's a bunch of different expressions about this. But I think, it's a healthy experience to go through a crisis of some kind in your life. And it sucks when it happens to you and you're suddenly like without an employer or without a lifeline or without a safety net or whatever motivates you, and it's vastly different when you're at different parts of your career, wherever, or depending on the company that it happens from, and some people are fortunate enough to have companies and employers that really do care about them and make sure that they're taken care of when they leave. And, I'm always grateful for that. But it doesn't stop the grief. Like I recently separated from Lixel, and everybody knows this. And if you didn't know it, you know it now. But I knew how things were going. And as I said earlier on, this gap between focusing on the future versus focusing on the now, getting that balance right, and reading the room and understanding the business situation, how I'm going to make that argument, but still do what I think is necessary. I don't know if that's one of the reasons why we decided to separate, but in my mind, it definitely was a source of anxiety for me. Oh yeah. And so I was really, I felt really relieved, and I want to do a whole bunch of different things. And that's
that's my nature. So now I have the opportunity to do that. And I'm grateful for that. But, you know, a lot of that has to do with where I'm at in my life and having exercised this muscle before, and, you know, just having a different kind of network now, and having my show and having a brand. Like, there's a lot there. There's a much stronger foundation this time around. Right. But I don't really where I wanted to go. And I think you're the same way as well, is that, you know, this time around it's different. Right. And a lot of that just has to do with those good behaviors and just taking control and taking leadership, right? Mm-hmm. But really, where I wanted to go with this, I'm sorry, let
me jump into one thing, and
sure.
I'll say quickly, because I'm glad you brought up the grieving process. I think very few people, you know, separating, as you put it, especially when you either had limited control or was out of your control, it is a grieving process.
Yeah.
And more so if it was something that you didn't choose to do. I mean, if you leave for something else, it's a difficult process, but and you may, I'm not even sure. I don't think it's the same. I think when it happens and it's out of your control, you do grieve, and it's something that people don't talk about. Mm-hmm. But I will say that grief is both ugly and beautiful, right? It's ugly in the sense that it's painful, and anyone that you meet that is grieving, you should actually make an effort to talk to them, because when someone's going through something painful, the worst thing you can do is sort of not know how to deal with it. So you just sort of stay away. Now, the beautiful part is that, again, now you have to make personal choices here, but there's a lot of gifts that do come with grieving. You can reprioritize your life. You can really understand what's important. It gives you perspective, clarity, all these kinds of things. Sometimes the people that come out of the woodwork, you go, that person really made an effort. And so I can now choose, I can now keep them close to me, and I don't have to do that with others. Mm-hmm. And that kind of like frees you up. So there's a lot of gifts that come with this. So it's ugly and beautiful in the same breath.
Yeah. It's the cycle though is fascinating to me. And, I've experienced grief several, many more times than I'd like to admit, early in life. And I think it just sort of stuck with me, but there's that cycle, of denial. I don't know what the 5 stages are, but there are stages, and there's a point in there that there's denial, and ultimately it gets to acceptance, right? There's anger, denial.
It's also not super linear. People think that grief is linear. It's not. It's what you just said. It's cyclical. Right.
So I kind of started to think a little bit more, and as you were talking, actually, about maybe we're in a profession that is in a grief cycle. And it's not because, and when I say profession, I'm talking about communications, and I suppose to some degree marketing, but when you think about PR and communications, especially, grief is ultimately, of course, you think about it dealing with death, but it's not dealing with death. It's dealing with the removal of something from your life, or the loss of something from your life. And it is a loss situation. And when we look at the profession, I think, and Gen Xers would know this really well, and those older than us would know it even better, is the profession today looks a lot different than it was several years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. There are so many changes happening. And, understanding how to cope with that change, it doesn't have to have the oppressive and depressive and sad nature of grief, but it does have this kind of element of denial, resistance, and ultimately acceptance that I think we need to have more of. And none of us are perfect about this, and none of us really can read the tea leaves. But it's an interesting frame within which to see the changes around us, and I'm going to do some more noodling on that. But and maybe that's one of the reasons why the TBD is coming for us all. So I wanted to circle back to that and say, like, just kind of, what's happening right now in this crazy industry? And we can call it, when I say the industry, let's just say, integrated marketing communications, that whole field that we're in, because lines are blurred and all that. But, what are the changes that are happening now that might be coming that you think necessitate this idea that we all are going to have to be CEOs of TBD?
We can broaden that aperture. Honestly, let's put the entire corporate white collar world. Okay, so unless you're out there doing a physical, or if you have like a desk job, you're part of the corporate workforce. Okay, and yes, it's a spectrum. So we are, because we're technology, marketing, communications, we're probably on pretty close to one side where you age out. You just age out. That is a fact. Now, on the other side, I mentioned, like, I know people that, working for large pharmaceutical companies. That's going to happen later. Okay. But here is the reality. Okay. What's retirement age right now? 65?
Something like that. 65, 62. Okay. Yeah.
It's 65. You're not staying in the white collar world of work. You are not staying employed until you're 65. That is if that is the case, super outlier. And in that spectrum, again, if you are on the side where it's maybe closer to marketing, technology, things like that, you're considered old at 40, right?
Yeah, truth.
And if you're somewhere else, that's, again, maybe more legacy. Maybe it's maybe it's even a field where I think some of the exceptions, like I want my really good childhood friend. He's in a field, a niche part of civil engineering, where it's like, people do work in their 70s because it's so niche, and you're more respected for the knowledge that you get. I think many fields should be like that, but that tends to be the outlier. Mm-hmm. So this idea of like, and TBD is to be determined, and so you got to figure it out, and you probably have to figure it out without the assistance of a full-time benefactor as a FTE or full-time employee.
Mm-hmm.
I think that largely speaking, in the world of white collar work, I think once you're north of 55, somewhere in that spectrum, it's going to become more difficult. And then the question is, now what? Because you may not. Now, that's if you've actually planned well. Like, maybe you can retire at 65 and then throw in other stats where most people can't. So then what do you do? What do you do from 55 to 70?
Yeah.
And, it is going to come for us all. It's the one form of ism that doesn't discriminate, right? In the corporate world, there's lots of isms that, Dan, as someone in communications, very well, lots of effort is paid around all kinds of diversity, all kinds of equity, really leveling it out. But age is a different animal.
Yeah.
Age is actually sort of, in most white collar cultures, it's something they kind of want to stay away from because of everything that we're talking about, because it's the one acceptable ism in the world of white collar work.
Yeah, it's exceedingly difficult to prove that you're being discriminated against based on age as well. And the burden, unlike any of the other protected classes, the burden of proving ageism is on the person who's being discriminated against. And I'm not saying that I've experienced that, at least not right to my face. But I have no doubt that, as resumes go out and people look at, when it starts to go to 2 pages, you're like, wait, how long has this guy been alive? And it's just like, it's not that I can't do the job. It's not that I can't, contribute. It's just that, will I be happy? And a lot of employers are going, well, we're going to have to pay this person more than somebody younger. That's the number one thing, I think. And then beyond that, it's like, well, how's this person going to really jive with our culture and with, the check boxes the flags start to raise.
Yeah.
And, and I'm absolutely certain that happens in the minds of talent acquisition people, recruiters, et cetera. And then when you get through the interview process, the other part of it is, you get older or you get longer in the profession, and if you're still a cog in the gears, or you're still just a middle level kind of, I guess, like just doer of some kind. The irony is that there's probably still a lot of things you can just keep doing that. Like you can just keep plugging away until somebody says we're paying you too much to do something somebody younger could do. Right.
Yeah.
But if you are an executive, or you're, ambitious, or you're really able to take on a much larger role or bigger responsibility or something like that, there are far fewer of those roles. So it's harder.
Right.
It's just, it's just a natural, it's the law.
And everyone has to make the personal decision. Like, is that the life I want?
Right. Yeah.
Because there's a lot of concessions that come with that. Also a lot of great perks. I mean, Dan, I would be lying to you if going out to Tokyo and working with high functioning executives and having an amazing day of working sessions and teaching and learning and listening, and then going out for karaoke on the dime of the company, and then doing it over again before coming home. Like, it's pretty freaking great.
It is great. I'm looking at my mileage plus status plummet, right? Because I'm not getting any paid for flights anymore. And it's a very, very first world privilege problem, but it's still like it's just like another like chink in the armor, like like another hit. And I only feel it when I travel with my family and I can't get them through the line fast anymore. Like, Dad, why can't we go to that little door over there? Your dad's lost status. I'm sorry. It's almost more embarrassing to say that than hey, I'm not working for a company anymore. You know what I mean? Yeah. So it's these little things, and I don't want to really think about those as anything worth thinking about, really, but it does. It gets to you. The thing is, though, that there are so many, there's so much happening around us now that I think that the nature of work and the nature of this framework that almost all of corporate America, at least, functions within, which is that, you age out.
Yeah.
It's got to change. And it's changing in some places, but it really needs to change. And when I say the nature of work, I mean, what is a role? What is a job? Do we have the right titles? Is this progression the right way to go? I mean, if you're a leader of people and there's a whole management kind of track, that's one thing. You need to progress based on how well you've done as a manager in the past. But on the other hand, on the functional side, with functional expertise, that is so malleable and there's so many different things happening all the time. So, one of the things that hamstrings larger companies, I think, is this extreme compliance and, adherence to, the job description needs to have these elements and the elements need to be verified in the market. And you have to have this middle point in the salary. And, it's got to be all like top to bottom, almost uniform with other companies in the same field or other places in the industry. Right.
Yeah.
And I think that's fine to a point, but it stifles the ability to be flexible in hiring. And I don't know where the solution to this is. I just think it's a problem.
Well, let's talk about some of the forces at play, and let's look at it with a future lens, because there's a couple of unique things that are going on that are going to be really, you're starting to see the early days of it shake out, and nobody knows exactly where this is going.
Yeah.
There's so aging out is actually not all that new. Okay. That's kind of a traditional thing. What is new or unique or a different flavor? A couple of forces that I think are really going to be shaping the future of the white collar world of work. AI, absolutely,
100%.
But more specifically, AI, because AI, what AI does really well is it excels at entry level work. AI does what like someone coming into the workforce, right, with no experience or very little experience, the things that the tasks that you would give to those employees is what AI excels at. Okay, so that's like tsunami number one, and we've never had that. As a matter of fact, you like so many of these companies, relied on that incoming, force. Okay, so that's one. Secondly, you have a very unique generation that's smaller than its previous. You have Gen Z coming in that has very different attitudes about work. There's just an article in the Wall Street Journal how like the number one perk of Gen Z is, do you offer mental health services, right? And then if you look historically, it was like, do you have an on-site gym, or do you have an on-site kitchen? It's just different. Okay. But, so you got attitudes about work and work culture are pretty unique with Gen Z. We could spend a whole podcast on that, but just park that one. But related to that, you also now have the hybrid, just to overgeneralize, the hybrid world of work. Some of it's remote, some of it's not. Office culture is not what it was. Anyone that you talk to, even if they're back into an office part-time, it is totally different. You've got people that love it and really benefit from it. Millennials probably the most. They got young families. They are the ones that, like, the millennials are the biggest demographic in the workforce. They're the ones that they're oftentimes the middle managers that often get sort of like thrown on the bus, but also are the, if we're really honest, kind of keep a company going. Yeah. And so they got to keep them happy. But then by the same breath, the Gen Zers who need a lot of guidance and mentorship and actually that would benefit the most. Scott Galloway talks about this all the time. Yeah. They've lost out on things that could benefit. So, you got that dynamic. And then also just sort of, we are at a somewhat unique mix. I mean, there's the multi-generational workforce is not necessarily a new dynamic, but you've got four interesting generations currently in the workforce. You have boomers. There's definitely still boomers in the workforce. Gen X, millennials, and Gen Z, all super distinct working styles, all figuring out how to work with each other, all bring strengths to the table, all have deficits, all could learn from each other. And I think organizations are really going to grapple with, again, that kind of relates to the world of remote work, where it's going to work really well for some of those demographics and less well for others, right? So those four things, I think, when you look at them, and they're each really big in and of itself, I think those begin to shape the future of the white collar world in this context of like the little slice that we're looking at it. Yeah, where we're definitely in those years where if you do choose to saddle up with an employer, you just know a part of it is you may not be there for very long, because that's kind of how the world operates.
And in that context, it makes sense both out of self-preservation, but also out of the idea that you want to contribute, right? You want to actually continue to like do great work. It makes sense to stay on top of what's happening, what's coming. And again, in our little slice of the universe here. And you mentioned that AI, excels at entry level work totally, and
absolutely, best intern you'll ever have.
Best intern you'll ever. That's exactly what I call it, an intern. And a recurring theme is that I hear among my guests, and certainly among people I speak to in the wider world, is, boy, I know I can save a lot of money on hiring, but I don't know how. And at the same time, it's wait a second. If I don't need as many young people, how am I going to get the wisdom and knowledge that we need to keep the company going? So wait, what the hell? There's a dissonance there that is very difficult for, I think, some senior leaders to really cope with. But where I've been looking more recently, partly because of my own situation, is the idea that AI, yes, it's great at entry level, but if you're, start to get even moderately familiar with it and start to understand, what's happening in that space, but also how to implement and adapt to those tools, it becomes a virtual team for you. So I think it's hard to make this this jump, or sometimes for folks. But when you have, let's just say ChatGPT, any of the LLMs, when you have one of these things open on your desktop or on your phone, it's important to keep in mind that you can keep on opening up new chats and do different things all at once. So essentially, you can have those entry level tasks. And I don't like to automate everything, but you can have those entry level tasks help with that, while at the same time you can have something there to help you formulate strategy. You can have something there to help you, kind of understand audiences. You can, there's these other more complicated, higher level, activities that it won't do for you, but it will help you do. So you essentially have this level of enablement that never existed before. So when you're aging out of a job, or if you've been let go, or if there's something there, one of the key differences from the past is, well, it doesn't cost me anything to hire a team anymore, because now I can actually do more to kind of create value and create a consulting business or a business of some kind, because I don't have to hire 4 people to do these admin tasks. In fact, I don't have to hire anybody.
Yeah.
So there's a degree there that we're just starting to really scratch the surface of. And I think that also applies.
It's never been such a good time to be a CEO of TBD.
It has never been as good a time to be a CEO of TBD. That is, I think that's totally true.
There's actually one of the, I'm going to add another macro trend on the employment one, because I forgot this one, but everything you just said about AI is making me, it's not just an AI specific thing. There's between AI, allowing us to be more productive, but also probably more importantly, like so many of the cultural shifts where everybody's rethinking their relationship with work, including Gen Zers who just don't want to work the way. I have 2 Gen Zers. They're like, Dad, we don't want to work. We don't want to work as much as you did. And I'm telling you, mark my words, any executives listening to this that is in a company with Gen Zers, you will find this out.
Yeah, it
is a different, I know it's a generalization, but you will find this out. There's plenty of write-ups on it as well. And so the other big macro trend is sort of as people rethink their relationship with work. I mean, I talked about like the lifestyle, right? And taking that pause, realizing how hot I was running. A lot more people are open to different forms of work, 1099s. I worked for when I was doing it myself, I had a client for a while who was a contingent workforce company. And contingent workforce is basically you are a 1099. Okay. So you're working on contract, and their business back in 2020 and probably up till now, I mean, exploded because people were like, they reassessed their relationship with work. They were like, maybe I'll go a different way and I'll be a contractor. And even though, I'm not going to rise up in the organization traditionally and get all the perks that come with that, maybe I don't need the perks. Maybe all I need is I live on this much. Maybe I live in an area that doesn't cost as much.
Yeah.
Something I've done. I've redesigned my life. I live in a much less expensive metro area, San Antonio versus Chicago.
That's available to everybody. Now, I mean, it's. I was just thinking about this idea of the fractional role, like the fractional role, right? That the 1099 could be a consultant, it could be a project, but you're hearing a lot about, and you've over the last several years, certainly, the fractional CMO, the fractional this, the fractional that, and it usually comes with a C-suite position.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to lie. If somebody says, "Hey, we need a fractional CCO or something like this, or CMCO," depending on what that entails, I'd be up for it, right? I mean, there are certain things that I can do really, really well, and there's certain things that I don't want to do and I can't do well. And if being fractional means I get to help a company with strategy and content, wonderful. If being fractional means we need somebody come here to help us with pricing, not me. So there's different elements to that. But I'm increasingly thinking that fractional is everybody now, like could be everybody. There's the fractional CCO.
Absolutely
CMO,
could be
CFO.
everyone.
Yeah.
Doesn't it feel like a natural progression? I mean, look at things historically. Okay. Look at 50, 60 plus years ago, and this still exists, but it's almost totally gone. The pension.
Right.
And now we have the 401k for how many years? And now, and like, I feel like this shift between the sort of traditional FTE to something else is actually just part of that. It's like, you should be in a perfect world. You should be able to work a job where you could spend 20 plus years and like get the gold watch and retire and have a pension. Those days do not exist anymore. So now it looks like something else. One of the reasons why I've reinvested in my health is because I'm realizing the best health insurance you have, is to just try to keep yourself healthy.
Yeah.
Right. Just like, it's like, well, if now really you only, and if the way things work is you get health insurance through your company and that's pretty much the best way, but you don't have a company and it's not great in our country, unless you're 65 and not awesome, but at least there's some support there. Then the best thing you can do is just take good care of yourself.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. There's so many, the elements that we need to consider with this future of work, or what the future worker looks like, and what the let's just call us the older workers will look like, is so rapidly changing and evolving, and even insurance companies are giving, some kind of benefit for proven wellness approaches and so on, and keeping yourself fit. But I think I think we're onto something here with this idea that the employee of the now and the employee of the future are very different employees, and there's a lag from where corporations and talent acquisition and HR are now to what the reality is on the ground. And a great example, my friend Ethan McCarty brought this up, and I've probably mentioned it on almost every episode I've done since, which is this fascinated me. He's got a young Gen Z employee agency. And in a traditional agency world, this person would be doing all the shit work, right? This person in a traditional agency world would be like, doing research on, some on the media, or pulling down, in the old days it was clippings, but, reading and reviewing and identifying things, that much of which is automated now. Taking on like the copywriting tasks for, writing press releases and stuff like that. How awful that would be now, right? But this employee has basically constructed her own ecosystem of tools, some AI, some other technological, that basically allow her to be a one-woman operational force. So, whatever the task is and whatever the job is, she needs to have the core skill. She needs to be able to write. She needs to be able to do the thinking. But to make the workflow, she has this tool for editing, and this tool for management, and this tool for, so it's a very self-contained package that's integratable with other technologies and other people.
Yeah.
There's no job description like this, right? Except when you see on job descriptions things like, we're looking for somebody who's innovative and entrepreneurial. Are you really? Are you? Because that's innovative. That's entrepreneurial.
Yeah.
The only thing separating her from an entrepreneur is that she's working for a company.
Okay, let's dig into that example. Let's dig into that example, because one of my pet peeves, it drives me crazy. And look, as human beings, I think we're all hardwired to just view ourselves as completely unique and irreplaceable. And like, we're all special snowflakes and nobody is exactly like me. And that's part of our hardwiring as a DNA, in our DNA. And one of the big arguments, there was even I think a piece in the New Yorker that got into this. It's like, AI will never do art. Or, the big thing is like, there's just something so special. I mean, I can even say this as someone who like works in the world of insights quite a bit. There's some truth to that. There's some truth, like, and good art. Yeah. But the thing that those arguments really gloss over is how much of our world operates on good enough. And AI is really freaking good at good enough. I mean, I mentioned pharma, for example, right? As a space, like most of the stuff that has to get produced for pharma communications, first of all, it has to be compliant, right? It has to, pass, and people are needed for that. But I'm sure also machines play a role. And it's not just pharma. I mean, it's the bulk of work output in the world from employers, from employees, the bulk of output in general, it's good enough. It's not art. It's not something where you just like, it's not this amazing. Now there's an opportunity for people who are so good at their craft that it stands out. But I feel like we're kidding ourselves when we think that that's everything, or that needs to be everything. Look at how many people I've seen people lament. Oh, great. I used to get 100 emails a day, spam emails that were written by people, and now they're written by AI, and now I got to deal with AI. You're making my case for me. That's the point. That's exactly yes, you're always going to get email, and now it's going to be written by AI. Exactly. Because those emails were always just good enough.
Yeah. I mean, it's exactly, there's a big so what here, and a clarion call for people who are, truly remarkable at their work, or for people to become remarkable at their work. There's a great quote from Mark Schaefer recently, and I'm gonna butcher it, but he was on my show a little while back. And
Mark. Every time we talk, it's always Mark.
It's always Mark. Yeah, I know. It's yet another Mark Bridge here, but the number one name dropped person on my show, probably. But he said that there's a pandemic of dull, and AI can do dull, right? Let AI do the dull. Nobody needs you to do dull. So if you do the dull, you're going to be replaced by AI, right? There's no future for you. But if you are, I think I say remarkable, but I think he said spectacular. If you're spectacular at what you do, and that's the way that you need to think about. How do you become spectacular?
Yeah.
And I think that's right.
You can really stand out. But again, if you are a software company and you're cranking out the emails to your customers, like that's not like Rashad Tabakawala is an example, and I just spoke to him recently, writes an amazingly insightful newsletter. It's great. The guy's a genius. Like no, AI is not going to replace what he does, but he's also not a software company cranking out we're talking about performance-based marketing, right? So it's all like trying to figure out the algorithms and the exact time that goes out to get someone to open up an email. Like, the machines are already started doing that. They're going to keep doing that. They might as well do it. Like if you're a copywriter and that's what you do, like, your job's going away.
Yeah. And you need to either come to grips with reality, about that. Find new skills, or just get really, really good at your craft. Like get really good at it so that you're indispensable, which means you can't be doing that. You can't be doing those emails. Like don't even try to build a career in an area that you absolutely know doesn't have to be anything more than good enough.
Yeah. I mean, the reality of it is they will be their tools that they're using, but the tools will make them more efficient, which means you will need less cops. So it goes back to that, like Jeremiah Owen talks about, and this is not him uniquely. This is the big buzz in anyone who lives in Silicon Valley. It's like the company of one, and $1 billion, company. It's just one person. There's some truth to that, but the more boring version of that is, the team that we once needed a team of 10. Now a team of 5 can provide that level of output and quantity of output just as, the same using these newer tools.
Yeah. And I think at the same time, and this, as we sort of wind down, let's bring this to our colleagues in communications and marketing, right? At the same time, those of us and those listeners who are gainfully employed and want to remain gainfully employed, I see this as a massive opportunity for those who see this opportunity, for those who are, it's trite, but who are entrepreneurial, who are innovative, like who are curious by nature. And that's a lot of people in our world. Like, I think it's a superpower of mine, but I'm not the only one who says that. There's a lot of folks in our world who are like, want to just keep asking questions. That is the key to unlocking the power of AI, to me anyway, for people in our world, right? And it takes I think it will take a mindset shift. It will take a rethinking of what you expect to get out of an employee. Like, okay, here's your job description, but let's look for somebody who's going to color out of the lines here, right? Because the opportunity is that AI gives you this power to expand tremendously. And I'm not saying rise up, although you can free yourself up and be smart about it and add more value in different ways, focus your time, blah, blah, blah. And maybe the further you get along the value chain and the further you get in your career, you're going to be thinking more in that way. Like, okay, I can free myself up to think if I can get rid of all these silly tasks. By the way, there's some neuroscience behind that with my friend, Dr. Michael Nestle, talking about how we get to be more strategic and more like very good at strategy as we get older and peak at that between 65 and 75. So there's a lot there. And I think we're in the thick of it now, but back to the point, like you have these comms teams that have like, okay, you've got these different silos or different kind of functions within the function. In marketing too, like we've got executive communications, we've got external communications, we have employee engagement, we have crisis, we have these, all these media outreach, media relations, which is going to change really dramatically in my mind. But anyway, you've got all these different things. Now, like, to be a generalist and sort of cover it all is something that we always encouraged, certainly up and comers in the field to do. And that's what a CCO needs to really understand everything, right? Well, AI gives you this opportunity to consolidate a lot of that in a more easily digestible and sort of easily or efficiently, I'm going to say easily, but more efficient ways so that you can expand your role and branch out into other things. An example would be, if you're able to exercise your curiosity and say, okay, look, I'm gonna dig into this particular stakeholder group or audience because I really want to know the best way to reach them. So, hey, I'm gonna draft something to them, and I'm gonna get AI to do it in a voice that resonates with them, and blah blah blah. So you have all this information, but then you're like, wait a second, I bet you there's more there, and bet you there's more ways I can segment this. What data are we missing? And you're like, but I'm not a data scientist. I'm crap with Excel. I'm not really great at reading data. Oh, wait a second. Let me just upload all this customer data and all this stuff into into my new intern here.
Right.
And then I will get a translation of that into something that I will understand. And then I can really bring more and more insights to the table backed by data. So suddenly I'm a data scientist.
Yeah.
Which was not part of my role. So these are expansions that can happen. And it's a big opportunity. I think, anybody at any age, at any point in their comms career has to be thinking of this. What is the future of what is the future of this, David? Like, how are people going to expand their roles, or how are the roles going to change? Like, what's your thoughts on all that?
I mean, the way that you laid it out, right? It's people can operate outside their areas of expertise. And I do think, yes, we'll see more of that. That's already happening. I think AI is so broad. It really is. Yeah. It is a big digital transformation. It's going to create new economies. I was just on a call with a startup, and they're creating a new product around, synthesizing data, and it's different. It's based off a language model. So it's going to be all those things. But I also think, to go back, a big part of our theme is like how we work in the white collar construct, regardless of size. Big company, CEO of TBD. One thing that AI is great at and should get better at is that first draft. That first draft of a business plan, that first draft of any written communication, that first draft of a data. To use your example, first draft of data analysis. It's really good at that, and we can't underestimate how powerful that is. I mean, because what it does is it shortens the time, and where it equips the really qualified human to add that editorial, add those insights, add the things that we're really good at. The industry talks about this being the human in the loop, but that's such a simple statement. The first draft is like the heavy lifting, and it gives us like a informed starting point to really add the things that make it special. And you're just going to see that everywhere. It's going to be pervasive and across industry, across verticals. So, but I do think in the long run, while new businesses are being created and while there's all new kind, all those things that come with disruptions, but there will be less of roles that there have been. There just will be.
Yeah.
In the past.
Yeah.
Because more people can do more with less, which is what every company wants. Yeah.
And things will change and new things will be created. I mean, if you have a zero-sum mentality, then you're like, the world is screwed. But if you have, kind of an abundance approach, like, okay, I don't know what's going to happen, but we look at history, we look at the way things develop, one door closes, another one opens.
Dan, what have we learned? This is where we have to be great philosophers and great historians in real time. It's interesting. You started this podcast, and we could probably end here, but I'm going to add the layer, and it's something that's underappreciated, right? It's like, yes, look forward. Yes, be in the present. I have 2 dogs. They remind me every day how valuable it is to live in, because all dogs are they live in the present, right? Yep. But also look back, and that's underrated. Like, what have we learned? We have been, you and I have been students of both technology and the past many digital revolutions. I'll just name 2. Mm-hmm. There have been many, but the mobile phone plus social networks.
Yeah.
And all the amazing things, all the amazing connections, relationships that we built over time. When I was in Japan, I was talking about how communications were changing based on those things. What about the negatives? Okay. Mm-hmm. Mental illness, body dysmorphia, teens that are growing. I mean, I've seen it with my own boys. I've had to it's been, they have almost been derailed by just those 2 things in their lives, in their young lives.
Yeah.
So I think you have to view the world and understand the potential and the good, but also understand the negative societal impact as well. And somewhere in the middle is the pure truth. And that's for us to figure out how to navigate both professionally and personally.
So important to be looking at history. I always neglect to mention or to value how I was trained in some ways as an historian, for what it's worth, as an undergrad, and my favorite subject, my favorite class, in my major at Penn was diplomatic history, and the reason I loved it was because it didn't take, like, the professor and the noise that you hear around you had absolutely nothing to do with the conclusions that you were going to draw. You were looking at the original primary sources of everything and coming to your conclusions based on what you saw. It's really critical that we continue to do that everywhere, in all aspects of our professional life, especially. So, okay, you're hearing something from the mouth of Dan and from David. You're reading all kinds of stuff, but go to your history. Look at what is real and what the facts are and what's worked. Right? Get an analysis of what you can do. Work forward from there. That is so. All these things have to happen at the same time and at once. And I certainly hope people are listening to what's coming out of our mouths. Sorry for them sometimes, but it's true. Like that approach, that kind of like healthy historical perspective, looking at, okay, yeah, the advent of the mobile phone, the advent of the internet, right? We're old enough to remember that. How many people were put out of work by that? And how many of them are still unemployed? Precisely zero, right? It's like, it is a change is normal. It's natural. It's hyper accelerated right now. People are worried because we're in the middle of it. But again, it's part of that grief cycle. Are we in denial? Is there resistance? Is it anger? Are we, are we coming to acceptance? I don't know. I think we're coming all over the place.
There's 3 different hats we can wear. I think that we do wear when we're thinking about the 3 dimensions of time. When you're looking back, it's like with the lens of a student. What have I learned? What can I learn more about? When you're living, hopefully you're living in the present and you're experiencing. So when you're doing it right, you're experiencing the present, you're processing things in real time. And when you're sort of in this kind of like experience mindset. And when you're looking forward, you're prospecting. You're a prospector. You don't know for sure, but you're thinking, oh, this could possibly go in this direction. This maybe can go in this, and I think this might happen. And but you're in a prospector mindset. So sort of like student, someone who's experiencing, and then kind of being a prospector. Like they're 3 very different lenses that I think we should. I think it's a good thing is to sort of have all those lenses at play and like swap them out.
Oh yeah. And there's, and really a knowledge and an understanding of what's come before and how it's ended up is a fantastic lens through which to evaluate what you're going to be doing.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean you should make all of your decisions based on it, but you can't discount the lessons learned in the past. So on that note, David, I think it's time for us to wrap up. Any last words? Is it like, I think we kind of got a grip of what you're thinking about, but like final words for our marketing communications listeners and anybody else really about like, what's keeping you up at night? What's your last words of wisdom for us to take?
I mean, last words of wisdom, I think
on the show, not real, not like in life, but just for the
related to the things that we were talking about.
Like your last words of wisdom within this hour, not forever.
Okay. We covered a lot of ground. I think at the end of the day, be an observer. Like there's no like something, Dan, that you and I do is we take in a lot of information. Something that I do a lot is I synthesize that, and then I figure out like how that information is going to affect decisions that I make. And I think that's something we all need to be doing. I think that's something that will help you professionally and personally. Just pay attention to what's going on, know when to shift from being in the weeds to like getting yourself out, right? So you're kind of seeing the bigger picture. That's something I'm trying to do. And if you're honest about it, like you can't, like there's a time and place, like there's a time and place where you got to be in the weeds and you just have to be in the details. And then there's a time and place where you have to go, okay, now I need to give myself the headspace to look above it all. So all the things that we're talking about, we just talked about a number of white collar trends. We talked about AI. We talked about sort of being the CEO of TBD, and you know what you might find yourself in your career life. I think in any of those things, I think the common theme here is we talked a lot about the past, present, and future of work and personal. So add to the lens of that kind of like the detail versus the big picture when you're navigating those things. And there's a tension point between those two.
Yeah, fantastic advice. You know, anytime you feel that tension point or the gap, you know you're onto something, I think. Be observant. I'll add to that, just be curious and be inquisitive, of course, because that's my new business. But thank you, David. This has been fantastic. If anybody out there, and I highly recommend, of course, and almost, you know,
I have a newsletter.
Demand. I was going to say, I
have a newsletter. Go ahead.
And your newsletter is David by Design. It's Substack. Okay. And, you know, you can go to Substack and subscribe there, or you can just follow David on LinkedIn and I think you publish it all there as well.
Or just Google me. Pretty easy to
just
find
Google
on
David. DavidArmano.me.
Yeah, that's right.
Look, obviously as the CEO of TBD, that D is of prime importance. So anybody out there who wants to connect with David and think about, you know, working with David, go to davidarmano.me, full bio, everything is there. Cause the weird unicorn is really hard to define that easily. But if you go to davidarmano.me, you'll get it. And find David on LinkedIn and then on Twixter, X, whatever you want to call it, at Armano. You know, it's, you know, you've been around for a long time when you can just you can at your last name and you've got the account. You know, it's like one of those things.
All the cool kids are on Threads now. Like all my friends who used to be on Twitter are on Threads these days.
You know, I mean, my feeling on Threads is still meh. I know there's a lot of people there, and I'm probably, the algorithm is not nice to me. But you know, a lot of bad stuff there for what I've seen from, you know, but it's everywhere.
Something that you and I talked about this briefly, where I've got like a foot in so many different worlds. I mean, even professionally, it's like I've got my group of friends that are the communicators. I've got another group of friends that are the marketers. I have another group of friends that are like the CX / you know, designers / UX. There's something to be said for being
a node,
you know, at the crossroads of multiple worlds. It comes at its own challenges, but also too, I see it as a blessing. I have appreciation for what each of those, the people in each of those kind of worlds and communities bring to the table. And they're all different. Yeah.
Yeah. I should give it some more time or some more effort to look at Threads as well. But on that note, David, I love talking to you all the time, and we could keep going. Always learn something. Thanks so much. Thanks so much for coming on. And again, at Armano, Substack, David by Design, please read that. Great piece on imposter syndrome this week. And with LinkedIn and davidarmano.me. Thanks, David.
Thank you, Dan.
Talk to you soon. Thanks for taking the time to listen in on today's conversation. If you enjoyed it, please be sure to subscribe through the podcast player of your choice, share with your friends and colleagues, and leave me a review. 5 stars would be preferred, but it's up to you. Do you have ideas for future guests, or you want to be on the show? Let me know at dan@trendingcommunicator.com. Thanks again for listening to The Trending Communicator.